Okay, cool. We have it being recorded. Dimitri, right on time. Anything that happened before the recording doesn't count. So welcome to Feature Flags Deep Dive. The original intent of this meeting was kind of, Chase had reached out to me and asked to get up to speed with feature flags, and we thought a good idea would be to go through the feature flags direction page, but I don't promise not to go off cue. There is no agenda, Dimitri, it's just a discussion going over the direction pages, but if you want to go ahead and take notes, then please do. It actually will be pretty helpful. We have here on the call Chase, who is the engineering manager, Mike and Dimitri. Mike is the original designer of feature flags, and Dimitri is taking over feature flags. And actually, this is really a great opportunity because the previous deep dive that we had was outdated, so it's really a good time to create a new one and formulate a discussion. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we will go through the direction pages. And hopefully, Dimitri, if you can capture any action items that we have for call to action about updating anything, because I'm pretty sure not everything is written down in the direction page, but it should be. So throughout the discussion, feel free to ask questions, and maybe we'll take some action items. Okay, so before we start, just a general idea of what feature flags are. So as mentioned, feature flags can be used as part of software development, enable a feature to be tested before it's complete and ready for release. A feature flag is used to enable or disable a feature during runtime, and this is really important, the word runtime, where the unfinished features are hidden so they don't appear in the user interface. So a really, really nice example of this would be, I'm a developer, I'm working on my development. It's time to release the code, but I haven't finished developing my feature. But instead of taking out my entire development code base, all I do is turn off a feature flag. So in theory, if this is an isolated feature, this doesn't do any harm to anything, and I don't need to do additional testing over anything because I took code out, because we know that bugs are introduced also when code is introduced, but also when code is taken out. So this kind of gives you ease of mind if you're a QA tester and you tested a specific build, but there's a specific feature that's not ready, just turn it off and you're ready to go. So it's not exposed to anyone, no harm done. So that's just one use case. So any questions up until now? Cool. So tying into our progressive delivery strategy, this allows many small incremental versions of software to be delivered without the cost of constant branching and merging. So we are the progressive delivery group, and the reason why feature flags is developed by this group specifically is because it ties into progressive delivery concept. The progressive delivery concept means that it's kind of on top of, after I have a working CD solution, now I want to do small little deliveries, small little developments, and I want to test that everything's working properly on that without needing these huge, complete builds to test that everything's working properly. I can just, develop something and quickly test it. So feature flags, since it's really easy to manage them and turn them on and off if needed, and even control the amount of audience that's getting this new feature, whether it's by percentage or by specific customer indication, which may be a user ID, it could be some other characteristic like they're a premium user or they're in this tier, or maybe they're a new user in the system, someone that's under 30 days and you want to guide them in some way, or maybe expose specific features for beginners and then they don't need it later on. Things like that. So you kind of group your users in some way, and you expose those features for that specific group. And again, it could be for dogfooding purposes, so internally only for your QA team, or even segmenting real users, real customers off of your deployment. Okay. And again, the ultimate goal is to provide an easy way to configure and monitor feature flags that integrate in the continuous development lifecycle. So as GitLab is a single tool for the entire DevOps toolchain, the idea that we have visual ties from feature flags to ongoing issues, merge requests, and helping you understand the state of everything with a comprehensive dashboard that will allow developers to take action if necessary is like the key goal of where we want to go at the end of the day. So this is like kind of the end goal is making it super easy to look at some kind of board and really understand everything from that board, like what's going on. Very similar to post-deployment monitoring. So you develop something, you know exactly where the flags are, what features and issues are related to it, what turned it on, who turned it on, where, which environment, by whom, who is exposed to this new feature. So like really making it super easy to understand what is going on there. And then the last sentence is to allow developers to take action when necessary in order to minimize risk and technical debt. Is feature flags adds some complexity to the code. It does add technical debt to your code because you have this thing that you're experimenting with, enabling a feature, and then at the end of the day, when everything's working properly, you don't really need a flag. You can, in theory, expose it to all the users. There may be feature flags that you want to live forever, and we'll talk about that soon. But in general, we're talking about a use case where you're trying out something and you want to gain confidence and slowly introduce this feature to more users until you finally hit 100%. So when you reach 100%, there really is no point to leave the feature flags in the system. Maybe there is a point to do that for like a finite amount of time, like a month, see that everything's fine, and then you need to get rid of the flag. So the idea is that this dashboard will tell you when it's time to remove the flag, and then it's no longer necessary, and make it super easy to manage and monitor.
And without like regard to, we're not like specifically targeting one type of, one area for feature flags versus another, right? Like we're not necessarily saying feature flags only live in JavaScript in the UI. They could, the usage of feature flags could be anywhere.
The usage of feature flag we hope for it to be multi-language and, you know, supporting any kind of deployment. We don't want to confine it to anything.
Okay.
I don't
sorry.
That might be something that we should add to this direction page right there, is that is what we plan to do. Because as we've gotten into this, right, we kind of stuck our toe in and didn't realize how important of a statement that was. So maybe we should add that to the page somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very good call out from both Chase and Mike. Yeah, so when we started exploring feature flags, we decided on an open source solution called Unleash. And the reason that we did that was because it's multi-language support. It doesn't support everything, but it supports a wide range of solutions, and we at GitLab love open source. So if we look at the languages supported, here, you can see we have Java, Node, Go, Ruby, Python, and .NET. This is the official SDKs, and you can see that there's some expansions, including one by our own Andrew, that expanded the library. So I did have a customer call, and they asked about C++, for example. That's not supported here. So it's definitely of interest to customers for additional languages. Another interesting thing to note is that Unleash recently announced that they are spinning up a hosted option. So there still is the open source offering, but for enterprises, they're offering to manage as the server all the feature flags. And that's something that is very interesting for us while we, need to manage thousands of projects and thousands of flags. It's very interesting for us to know how they manage it and also other competitors. Okay, so on this page, we can see, you know, we already mentioned feature flags introduces technical debt because sometimes flags are forgotten or left as stale code. So it's important for us to recommend to users when to remove code, as we don't want to introduce tech debt. So on this page, there's a bunch of links. We have a link to the maturity plan. Where you can also write that is there a bug? The maturity plan here. So at the moment we're at viable. Viable means that we solve some solutions of the real world. Complete means that we're, you know, kind of solving the majority of the use cases. We're not there yet. And then at the end we have lovable as a maturity. So we're currently at viable, and we're working really hard to get to a solution that covers more use cases. But one that we mentioned now is, you know, we don't support all languages. That's like one gap that we have. There's additional gaps that we have from competitors. One of them is like supporting regex in rules of feature flags, and more complex scenarios. A/B testing is one, and maybe Dimitri will expand on that later. Permissions is a big one. And then also the whole polling versus caching mechanism as well. We'll get to maturity also. So the way that the direction page is built is that we have, every month I update this is the what's next and why. So every milestone this gets updated, and right now we worked on a really huge refactoring where we are stopping support of our legacy feature flags and moving to support a new version of feature flags. And the reason was that it was really hard to support multiple strategies per environment. And when you scale, it's something that's really needed. So we just completed the refactor of the new feature flags, and this allows us to set multiple strategies per environments, and maybe even before that, just introducing the concept of a strategy as something that lives independent of the feature flag and can be pinned to a feature flag or to more than one feature flag, which was a really, you know, change of concept in our feature flag. So there are a little bit of gaps right now. Like for example, the feature flag dashboard now doesn't show you yet the environment that's linked or the strategy that's linked to a feature flag once it's created, but we're going to overcome that gap in this milestone. So this is right for 13.2, and I will update this after 13.2. So let's see. In 13.2, we are working on feedback that we received on the new version of feature flags because, you know, we first dog food everything. We got a bunch of feedback from internal customers, and we want to make them happy so that everyone is happy. So we worked on, you know, there was some problems with deleting feature flags, for example, wasn't very consistent, and things like that. So everything, there's an epic that I opened up, feedback from feature flags that you can see here, and you can see where they were scheduled. So we started with a delete button, and then configuring features flags is a struggle. This was more around documentation. And there was some confusion about the user strategies naming. So it's a small fix, but we kind of want to make the experience better.
Gap you spoke of, is that detailed in an issue or an epic?
Yes. So it's on 13.3. And let me get it. Don't mind me of the way that I'm looking, but I'm going to go from the planning issue because we just talked about that. So this is the gap. Display strategy information on feature flag list view. And what we can see here, this is the way that the old UI looks. So you can see that for old feature flags, you can see the environment specs here, including the strategy that's joined for them. So you can see that, for example, on the testing environment, this flag is enabled for 50% and on production 15%. But for the new flags that were created, there's no data. Okay? So it's hard to understand what's going on. You have the data in the edit, but it's really inconvenient. And this just adjusts the way that it looks. So we're adding this data that gives you all the information on the flag. So you can see a description of the flag, when it was created, by whom, how many linked issues there are, and the strategies that are connected to it. And you can see here exactly the environment as well. So it's just feature parity between the V1 and V2. Yeah, so additional work that we had in 13.2, so this was planned for 13.3, what you asked, Dimitri. Going back to 13.2, what we're working on currently is adding the ability to create and modify user lists via the UI. So in 13.1, we added the ability to create lists, user lists via the API. Just going back to explain what user lists are. We already support user IDs from 12.2, from milestone 12.2, which allows you to add user IDs, comma separated. So for example, Orig, comma Mike, comma Chase, comma Dimitri would represent us. The problem was that you would need to copy that from every feature flag that you wanted to use. And if you needed to modify any of those user IDs, you would need to do them in every single feature flag that you did, which is super annoying. So we added the concept of user list, which creates user lists that can be used multiple times on different strategies and different flags. So we would theoretically just create one list called feature flags deep dive that contains the list of all of us. And if we needed to modify them, you only do it from that list, from one spot, and you don't need to, go every single flag and redo them. So managing it from one location. And we added the ability to do that through API, and we're completing the same action through the UI. We do want every action to be supported by both. We saw that some of our users prefer using the UI, and some API really is a preference, and so we want all the features to be supported in both ways. And the next thing that we're working on in this milestone is percent rollout strategy. So if we open the issue, oh, I didn't mean to open it up on the same page, but no worries. This is an extension of our current percent rollout. So we already support percent rollout, which means that you can decide to expose your feature to 50% of your users on production, okay? And what is confusing about that is that you don't know what the stickiness of the solution is, okay? And what I mean by stickiness is that we want consistent behavior for the same user every time they go into my app. Let's, for the sake of simplicity, say that we're using a website. Every time the same user logs into my website, I want them to see the same thing. Because in feature flags, basically you can have different behaviors if a feature is on or off. So imagine you're inside this GitLab page and some users will see an extra button here, but some of the users will not see it because it's disabled for them. So in order to commit to consistent behavior, we now allow the users to choose their stickiness based on either the user ID, the session ID, or random, which means you don't care. Just 50% of the population, whatever. Which means that if you refresh your button several times, you'll see different behaviors if it's random. At the moment, the percent rollout goes by user ID, if I'm not mistaken, which means that the user needs to be logged in. Anonymous users, there's no commitment into having any stickiness whatsoever. So that's what happens behind the scenes, but it's not visible for the users at all. So with this extension, we allow the users to use the percent rollout. Still, they can define what percent and on what environments, but they can also define the stickiness. Any questions? Cool. Okay, so here's a list of the maturity plan. Now, it is not to be confused with the entire list of issues that are labeled feature flags, okay? The entire list of feature flags can be found by pressing this link, which will give you a list of everything that's open. The maturity plan is kind of the list of the most important issues that I think will bring us to the next maturity level of complete. Okay, I'm extending an invitation for you to comment or even make changes to this page if you think there are important issues that I had forgotten to add here, or if you want to create new ones or request new ones, then please go ahead and do that. So what do we have here? So I have been maintaining this page for a year or so, so I kind of make it a point of also adding the complete once we deliver an issue, just to see how we're progressing the maturity plan. Not all the teams do that, but this is just my way of doing it. So in case you saw other direction pages, it's not something required from the handbook, it's just something that I like to do. So the key deliverables were adding percent rollout and user ID, which we did. Multiple strategies for feature flags is what we delivered in 13. Feature flag gradual rollout based on lists, which I just mentioned what it is. We just delivered, and now we're completing it with the added support in the UI. Add ability to associate feature flags with contextual issue, epic, and MR. So we have a different issue for each one of these. Let me just mention what this is. So the idea is that when I create a feature flag, I can link the issue that created it, that's related to it, so that from the feature flag view, I can really easily understand what caused this feature flag to be initiated in the first place, and even see the status of that issue. If it's in the backlog, if it's targeted to a milestone, if it's closed, if it's open, things like that. And then connecting it also from the other side. So from the issue list, we can see all the linked feature flags. So let me open it up, and I'm pretty sure that we have a mock here. So the idea is that, from the issue itself, here you can see the related issues, but we also opened up a complementary issue here. So I don't have them up, but the idea is, since we have linked issues in regular issues, you would have another linked feature flag section, very similar to this, that will list all the feature flags that are related to this issue, because there may be more than one. So just from every point of view, you can see what's going on, holistically throughout the system. The idea is also to connect this to MRs, merge requests themselves, and also to epics. So the complete 360. Chase, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was just curious, so we talked about maturity going from minimal to lovable, right, I think. And so I'm just wondering about percent completion. So if we do, we complete all the tasks here that are outlined in this list, does that make us complete? Or are the two things not associated? This is just a fraction of the list that gets us to complete, or what do you think?
That's an excellent question. So I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to move it over to Dimitri and Mike to expand on my answer. But if you would have asked that a few months ago, the answer would be yes. We would complete this issue list, and we would mark ourselves as complete. But we have changed that, and now I've decided that our scorecard is based on user research, which I'm going to let them answer, more broadly.
Yeah, I think, and Mike, please feel free to add to me, but I spoke this morning with Orit on jobs to be done, and it kind of broadens this this conversation a little bit. Instead of like a list of checkboxes to either it is there or it isn't there, to all right, it isn't there, it's there, but now how good is it? Because are we actually delivering value to our users, or are we thinking we are delivering value to our users? So after we deliver features, we will need to check if we are delivering on our promises. And then based on that feedback, we will discover new opportunities to deliver, user value, which might, as an addition to that, might prove more valuable to implement than some of the features later down the list, potentially. Just saying something here.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's about contextual connection. And this is a really big differentiator that competitors don't necessarily have. So we have two that are mentioned on the direction page. One of our biggest benefits as GitLab, being a single tool, is exactly this: having the ability to connect, your entire DevOps cycle. So all the way from plan, where you're planning issues, up until the delivery, you can monitor what's going on. So it's a big advantage that we have. I'm not saying that we're the only ones, but it is an advantage. Okay, next we have move features to core, which is, our most popular issue in feature flags. And the idea is to allow more tiers and more users to use feature flags. And when I'm saying this, I'm saying this a little bit hesitant, because not all the functionality of feature flags is going to be available for core. The basic functionality, everything that we support currently, configuring feature flags, is going to go to core. But for example, this contextual issue, plan itself, I think, is a higher tier. So that automatically makes it a paid feature and not something that we give free. For example, the next section, which is A/B testing, we have decided already to deliver to a higher tier. Dashboarding capabilities that, anything that's outside of a single IC that's using feature flags may go to a higher tier. But we do want the basic building blocks to be available for everyone. Then we have A/B testing based on feature flags. This is a very generic issue. Maybe I'll let Dimitri elaborate a little bit, since he's very deep in the user research in that area.
Yes, I can talk a little bit here. I think this is a whole category on itself, but in order to allow an organization to kind of make experimenting part of their development process, A/B testing is a core part of that, and it relies on feature flags, but it is I would say it is kind of has a different purpose, right? Where feature flags is there to reduce risk and make deployment easier. A/B testing is there to preferably see which kind of direction for the product development is the wisest one, be it performance, but mostly related to key metrics, such as even going up to AICV. SMOG is, I think, one of them. But anyway, seeing how users behave in one version versus the next, and deriving that data down to a key metric on which the experiment kind of dangles, either A side or the B side, or actually you can do multiple, of course, from that A, B, N, as many as you need. Will determine if an experiment has been successful, and kind of gives development teams a handle on, you know, which direction might potentially be, because it doesn't have to be that black and white, the right choice to move forward, and kind of allows to be more efficient at developing by relying more on data rather than only heuristics. So kind of expanding upon development process and practices.
Yeah, it's a very interesting opportunity for two reasons. One, this targets even new personas that we didn't, that's not in our, you know, natural space. Usually all our features are dedicated to around DevOps engineers and developers. And this kind of opens up a whole new line of targeted personas, because also less technical users may use this. And A/B test may be, you know, business value. So maybe it would be interesting to the sales team or to a growth team or to marketing. It could be really interesting for product designers that they want to test different, you know, variants of UX design and see what the users interact really nicely with. So really interesting in that space because it opens release up to like a whole new persona. And another really interesting thing is this is very, very similar to our thinking around post-deployment monitoring, because basically you're deploying a feature to a gradual audience, or maybe different features to different audiences. And then you need to collect feedback back from those users and take action on it. So it ties nicely to another theme that we're exploring. And it also connects us to the monitor stage as well. So really, really interesting opportunity. And it's huge. So this specific Epic is a very general idea, and I'm sure we're going to make it more specific and open a bunch of issues related to it based on the user research. Another thing that I've been doing in the direction page, which is also really important to note, is that this used to be this huge list of items, and very slowly I'm moving this more into an epic base because the issues just become so large. So it's more epic based, and it doesn't mean that we need to complete the entire epics in order for us to increase in maturity level. We just need to choose the MVC for each one. Then we have cookie-based access. So this is again around caching, around how the users are going to behave. Rule-based feature flags rollout strategy. So this is around allowing the users to basically customize whatever they want. Theoretically, right now we support, you know, tiers, not tiers, user ID and percent, but we kind of want users to use whatever they want. One of the really powerful things about feature flags is, since it's done on an application level, you can create rules based on things that are specific for your application. So imagine that you're creating some kind of application or website that creates playlists for songs, and you decided to group people by the amount of playlists they have in their amount of songs they have in a playlist, and you decided to give a specific feature for everyone that has 100 songs or more in their playlist. So this would allow you to create whatever custom rule you want based on your specific needs. And this is really powerful because I don't think that we can support every single rule that's created and offer it in a UI. So this lets the users do whatever they want. And really it goes down to granular support for your individual project. I think this is my favorite issue in terms of feature flags without going into A/B testing, because I think it opens up the most options and opportunities. And then my least favorite, or really important subject, but really, really hard and scary to approach is feature flag permissions. And this is a really, really large topic because there's different approaches to permissions and feature flags, even internally in GitLab. So the beauty of feature flags is that you can transform ownership of rolling out your features to the team. So historically, the people that were in charge of deploying to production were DevOps teams, SREs, and similar, and only those people were allowed to roll out something to production. Now, when you use feature flags, a developer can basically be responsible by themselves to make sure that the feature is working properly. And if they get, feedback that something's wrong, they can just turn it off in production. Now, this introduces a whole can of worms about permissions and what your company policy is, and whether or not you want to allow developers to be able to deploy features to production or not. On the one hand, it's really convenient because they're responsible end-to-end on their deliverables. On the other hand, taking GitLab as an example, if you speak to the delivery team, we have about 1,000 developers in GitLab, each one developing their own thing. Each one of them sees their own feature, their own deployment. And the only people who actually see GitLab.com are the delivery team, where they see all the features. So they kind of don't want to let the developers have complete control into production, because someone may be stepping on someone else's toes and they don't even know about it, because the developers on each team see their own developments and not what's going on between teams. So this is like a huge issue which deserves its own research on how to approach this. And I'm sure that the solution is give granular permissions for the admin to set, but exactly how that would look like, I'm not sure. And the way that we overcome this in GitLab is that in GitLab, everyone has permissions for everything, including deploying a feature flag to production. But the way that you deploy this is through ChatOps. And the ChatOps project, the roles are totally different, and only the delivery team and, I don't know, extra special personnel have permissions to actually turn the flags on production. Any questions? Oh, whew, I was scared about that one. Okay, so there's really big epics that I have here that that you can check. I think I need to change it to generic and not granular. I'm not sure, but basically I have different epics here that Mike and I have created in the past, where we grouped a bunch of different issues that are related to a specific topic, like the refactoring that we just did. So you can see here, there's different issues. There's even epics linked inside the epics. And we kind of tried to group the things in some kind of logical way for it to be easy to follow and read. So competitors. There's a really, really large amount of competitors out there, and some have really, really nice solutions. We're kind of late in the game in terms of when we came in to the feature flag space. So we're trying to close the gaps and find our sweet spots where we can, give our extra advantage in terms of feature flags. One of the competitors that is mentioned here is Launch Darkly, and there's a comparison done there. I'm actually in the process of redoing it. So I'm sure that I will update this soon with my new, here's my new research topic that I started to place here. And I'm trying to figure out, what we already support or what's a gap. And for the gaps that I decide that we're going to work on, I will open and link from here. Other competitors that we have that are not listed in the direction page, one is Rollout that's listed here, Rollout.io, which was actually acquired by CloudBees. There's also Split.io. Optimizely is a really strong one, really nice name that we've been hearing. They have nice solutions. I'm sure there's a bunch of more, but those are the ones that like pop into my mind. Analyst landscape. So we have had some conversations specifically targeted feature flags and progressive delivery. And I guess Jason didn't notice that I wrote here blast radiance because he usually tells me not to use violent referencing. But the idea is, again, with feature flags, we try to minimize the audience that is the first responders of the feature, get feedback, and based on the feedback, take action. And action may be, continuing rolling out gradually until we hit 100% if that's what we want. Or if needed, turning it off and rolling back, fixing the problems, and then retrying the rollout. Now we're reaching our top issues. So we have top customer sales issues, where I also update this every month, but not every month I have things to update. So some of the issues are consistently here because we just haven't worked on them yet, but they're still the top. So we have GitLab serves as a single application tool, and the customer success really want to see the association issues. So what we discussed about tying into feature flags with contextual issues or merge requests or epics, which we have just started, like we have just in production, you can already find today contextual connection between feature flags and the issues. And slowly we will continue adding the other ones. So merge requests and bidirectional and epics as well. The top customer issue, not surprisingly, is the most popular issue is to open source feature flags, which we should be working on this quarter. Top internal customers. So this is actually a really interesting one. Adding a webhook for feature flags that will trigger a pipeline and Slack notification in case a flag was toggled. So people really want to know, what's going on with my flag, whether it was turned on or off, which environment, other things like that. Really interesting, and we kind of touched on this. Our first customers are our internal customers, so dog fooding efforts. I should definitely update this. So we already have some feedback coming up from our versions that we just released in the previous milestone. And that's actually the feedback that we're working on now, making it really easy to work with V2 feature flags, which again, support multiple strategies per flag per environment. So a lot of our effort are around this, making it really easy for our own growth team, for example, and fulfillment teams and customer portal teams to use the solution that we're offering our customers and fixing whatever issues that they have or requests, because we're pretty sure that we're a really good use case of what customers need as well. Let's see what's tracked here. This is our rollout, and I will update that with the new epic for collecting feedback. So top vision item, so one of our main themes in CI/CD is progressive delivery, which feature flags by definition is, as we mentioned, because it allows you to deploy code incrementally and control the audience that will receive the new code. And our top vision issues are connecting feature flags to issues, what we mentioned, to get the benefit of our single application, which will allow our users to understand the context of the feature flags, their state, the associated plan, release, and deployment. So we got through all our direction pages. I I'm opening up the floor to discussion or questions that are not necessarily tied to the direction page.
And there's the one issue that was super interesting about sort of the ultimate flexible feature flag.
Yeah.
It just feels like the most open-ended. You create a title for the flag and you put some text here, and we will, it's kind of up to them, I think, on a lot of these things of you can set the, feature flag based on tier, feature flag engine replies with said tier, and then it's up to them. This one feels to me like it's super useful and the most flexible, but I'm wondering how if the Unleash engine or anything else supports this, or if it's just something that we will return to the client, whatever's consuming the feature flag API, and it's just up to them to figure out how to deal with. I think it's different than say user ID or something else where there needs to be some matchingness, like geolocation. Some of those other things feel like it's. I don't know. Feels like there's a second order of complication that's there that's not baked into the Unleash engine or some other thing that we're currently using.
You're spot on, Chase, and you're absolutely right. So I would split this up into two categories. One, this issue is huge, so it probably needs to be split up anyway, but I would split the world into two: things that I know based on my application and things that I don't know, right? So understanding geolocation requires me to know, other kind of APIs that I need to read from the client, and the client needs to give me this information. So it could be, a browser type, it could be an IP, a geolocation, things that the client needs to send me not being GitLab, but me as the application that is using feature flags, in order for me to distinguish anything about it. And I may already have this data because, a lot of websites, they today, are compatible to mobile, and they get, some kind of HTTP response that tells them, I am an Android, I am Chrome, I am, So maybe they have this information and I can leverage that information for creating a rule, but the rule needs to make sense for my application. We have no way as GitLab of validating, this group or rule and making sure that it's right. User IDs, also, we have no way to validate that these user IDs actually exist. They're third-party user IDs. So it's kind of similar in that sense. The problem really is that we need, the users need to add this logic somehow. And this is very similar to something that I raised in the Feature Flag Weekly meeting. So I asked about the support for regex, and we don't support it, but theoretically you could say, if my application already has a database that has all the user IDs, for example, in a column in the database, I'm going to use SQL just for an example, but it doesn't have to be that's my database. And I want to know all the users that have a domain that are at gitlab.com, because that's my user ID. My identifiers are email addresses, okay? I could basically do some kind of, SQL query that says, give me everything that completes with the at gitlab.com, and populate that into my user list, right? The downside about that is, A, you need to make this complex SQL query on the client side, B, or on the server side, but on the application using it, and B, it needs to constantly refresh because my user list may change. Maybe a user is no longer a user, and maybe I have new users. And then the question is, how often do you refresh this? So there's a bunch of open questions here, and that's why we're not jumping into, implementing it. Because there's a lot of things that we don't have control over.
Right.
And Unleash does have the concept of a custom activation strategy. It is obviously not the silver bullet, solve all problems. a lot of the geo stuff that you were talking like that, those are real problems, but there is a mechanism that they have to define these roles.
Cool.
Yeah, the way that if I remember correctly, their way to do custom strategies is basically combining different strategies together into one. But keep me honest, Mike.
I mean, they have a where you can basically just write a rule, and then that rule gets passed in, and I think you would have to execute that rule on the client side, and
Yeah.
your client would obviously need the appropriate parameters to be able to evaluate that rule. But it basically is just like you define a rule, and then you have the ability to turn that rule on and off. So it's very similar, in my opinion, to like just writing that rule in your client, just extracting it out so you can turn it on and off and apply it to different environments, and just bring it back into the feature flag realm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if we're good on that one, I did have one point about the cookie-based access. I see we have that listed on this page. I don't know that we're able to do that. I spent a little time looking at it while we were going through this, and I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying Unleash isn't clear on whether they have this or not. And if that is the case, I don't know if it should rise to the level of being on our direction page. Like I think this one needs a little bit more investigation before we add it to this page.
It's a good point. I would say we need some kind of cookie-based / caching / APN solution. Maybe not generic, not specifically this solution, but
yeah, it's an important thing to have.
Yeah.
It definitely, the concept of it, I definitely agree, should be on the direction page. I'm more worried about would we ever be able to satisfy that without rewriting some stuff.
We're not against rewriting stuff. We definitely are looking into, supporting feature flags at GitLab.com on scale. We need, to provide all these different mechanisms. So it's something that we definitely need to discuss and talk about. Chase, you're undecisive if you want to ask something.
No, I'm just thinking. Yeah, I was just thinking about that problem with cookie base. Well, like how would you accomplish that kind of that sort of thing? But yeah. No, this has been really helpful. Thank you for the deep dive.
Mike, before you transition to the other team, is there any wild dream that you wanted to implement here in feature flags and you haven't?
No, I think I got my way pretty good on this one. I got most of the dream made its way into the epics and stuff. So happy about that. I guess if there was one thing as you were going through there, like moonshotty kind of down the road, right? Like once we have the concept of associating with feature flags with issues in epics and MRs. I know it's very early on in the stages there, but maybe even requirements. We have requirements management that is just coming out. Might be interesting to link that in there, and just that pushing that idea further, right? Like leveraging the power of GitLab to what more can we connect these things to, and automatically turning things on and off, and more connectivity. But if there was one not so far off in the distant one, it might be requirements management.
Yeah, 100%. I'll open up an issue for that. That's a good point. And we actually have another connection that we made with the release management team, that on the release page itself, you'll also be able to see, the feature flags that are associated to the release that was released. So you actually know what you released with. Was the flag on or off? So you can get a really nice picture. We have 2 minutes left. Any questions, comments, feedback, anything? Cool. So if no one objects, I'm going to post this to the direction page.
That's good. Thank you.